You know the deal, Trevor. Every week, musical intro can be whatever you want. I really don't have any requests. Just do you. Okay?
So I've been thinking a lot about Darius Rucker, okay?
Okay.
People call me crazy. People wonder why.
Do you know the rest of the
No.
words? That's it? Because I...
You can call me a fool. Dun, dun.
Okay. I think that's the most normie we'll ever get on this show. Welcome to the Anthony Todd Show. I'm your host, Vincent, aka Vinny Vincent, aka a human garbage fire, aka there's a time in every young man's life where he decides if he wants to be a big crit or a big aka my favorite part of Thor Ragnarok was Hulk's bare ass. I'm joined today by my ever-attentive co-host, Trevor, aka Trevor, more like Deadbird. That was dumb. A.K. Time to Meet Your Mom.
I hate that song.
A.K. Clit or Us. You decide.
You have to decide one or the other.
A.K. the Robert Shaw choir version of Yankee Doodle Dandy is the best version of Yankee Doodle Dandy. A.K. the economic development director of Rapsody. And welcome again to the Anthony and Todd Show, folks. We got a great show planned for you this week. We're going to be talking about two critically acclaimed albums that I've been meaning to listen to at some point. I've heard good news and I've been wanting to listen to them, but finally got around to listening to them very recently. And I can say I've enjoyed both albums so far. First, we're going to talk about the new Big K.R.I.T album, Forever is a Mighty...
alrighty amount of
Don't
time.
give away the episode title. We're not there yet. It's a secret. Forever is a Mighty Long Time. And after that, we're going to be talking about Rapsody's latest album, Laila's Wisdom. And, yeah, that's the show this week. Are you ready to get in some Big K.R.I.T?
Let's talk to it.
We're going to talk to this record.
I'm knee-deep in K.R.I.T right now.
Big K.R.I.T is a southern rapper from Mississippi, and he's kind of been on my radar for a bit, but I've known his presence is there. But every time he, pops up on a track, I've never been super entertained. He's never surprised me. I've never been like, oh, Big K.R.I.T. And I was really surprised when his new album came out, and it was critically acclaimed not only from the normal press, but online reviewers. I felt like everyone I heard gave a review of this album, spoke really positively about it, and said it was one of the best conscious hip-hop albums of the year. Even more so, the best hip-hop album of this year. I thought a lot of people were praising this as the best hip-hop album of the year, and if it was, I wanted to listen to it. I wanted to see if it was up to the standards of not only conscious rap, not only jazz rap, but hip-hop in general, and I was excited to see if this album was actually good, if it actually did live up to the hype. Now, this album is a double album. It consists of two sides, the first side being the Big K.R.I.T side, and the second side being the Justin Scott side, Big K.R.I.T's real name. And
his name is actually K.R.I.T Smith.
K.R.I.T Smith. What's his middle name?
Timothy.
K.R.I.T Timothy Smith. K.R.I.T Timothy.
K.R.I.T Timothy
Smith. That's a good name.
Thank you.
And overall, what I could say about this album is Big K.R.I.T, he has a lot of potential, but I feel like on the first half of the album especially, he kind of flounders it. I feel like there's a lot to be done here on this project. The second half of the album is just so good compared to the first, and it makes me question why this is a double album when it could have been the best moments of both. Not to say one's just it's just terrible or anything. There's just a lot of meh moments to it. I feel like K.R.I.T's the parts I enjoy of K.R.I.T's personality really don't shine through on the first side, and I can see maybe why he's kind of doing that, because the second, I would say the first side is more commercial, it is more poppy, it is more southern hip-hop, basic southern hip-hop. It's nothing really too outside of the mold.
If you read the handbook for southern hip-hop, that is disc 1. That is Big K.R.I.T's new album.
Whereas the second album, I feel like, is more jazz rap. It's more conscious. It's more personal. He explores himself not only in the title of the first track, but overall it's more introspective, and that's the type of conscious hip hop, that's the type of jazz hip hop, that's the type of hip hop in general I want to hear. And the first half really just doesn't do it for me. And I know a lot of people really do enjoy the first half, but overall I felt like tracks like Confetti and 1999 and Ride With Me were just...
If you want to go and take a ride with me.
Not that one. Just kind of fell flat on their face. While in the second half, the last 4 tracks, it's just such a great ending. And K.R.I.T's able to explore himself. He's able to be introspective, and he's able to explore a plethora of topics, ranging from fame to wealth, and have a lot of great statements that resonate with you, especially towards the end of Bury Me in Gold, which I'll get into later. I feel like the ending statement of that really resonates with me, and he executes it really well. But I feel like it's just at a weird point in the album because the first half is so drastically different from the second. Not to say it's night and day, but I feel like first half, again, more southern hip hop, second half more jazz hip hop. Second half way more conscious than the first. But I do think this is a good project. Even the more meh moments on the first half, K.R.I.T's technical skill is fantastic. I have to give him that. Even though I do not like the hooks or I don't like a lot of the concepts of the tracks, I do feel like K.R.I.T's technical flow is good. Even though a lot of some more blander Atlanta hip hop production in the background of the first track kind of takes away from that, along with the hooks. I feel like K.R.I.T's able to shine through on the first half through that end, through his technical skill. Now, I think I've talked too much. Trevor, what did you think about this big K.R.I.T double album?
Definitely to bounce off of what you said, I'm definitely not saying that the first half of the album is bad. It's not bad, but compared to the second like the second half of the album or the second disc, whatever you want to call it, the Justin Scott portion of the album, it definitely does not shine as much as the Justin Scott portion. And I definitely think that the split was intentional. You can see it in the production. You can see it in the...
It's definitely done in this manner to show contrast, but I feel like, why is it really needed? You could have just done that in your songwriting, and it doesn't really need to be a concept of your album layout and your album placement. That was my main difficulty with it.
I find it interesting, just in saying that like the whole first section of the album is all about Big K.R.I.T. It's about his character of Big K.R.I.T. separated from his normal self. And so, of course, it's going to have this southern hip-hop style production. It's going to have these braggadocious flows that, like you said, in my opinion, become cliche after a while. Much like we've talked about Jay-Z's discography in the past when reviewing 444. And I think that Big K.R.I.T. in a way falls into that similar trap. Not in the same way that Jay-Z does, but... definitely I can see where those would be problematic. Again, not saying it's bad. There are a lot of really good tracks on here. Big Bank, Subenstein, Come Up to Get Down, or Get Up to Come Down, with CeeLo Green, the man himself.
He's referenced in the last track on Bury Me in Gold, right? That's all about CeeLo Green, right?
It's all about his new costume.
His Grammy costume.
Gnarls Hard.
Gnarly's Hard. That's the dumbest thing. That's going to be an album.
I'm ready.
I'm ready because, I don't know, CeeLo, his support for is like, anytime he pops up on like a track, as he's done over like the last couple of years, whether it's Kendrick, whether it's Big K.R.I.T, I've enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. So like I'm excited to see. And I don't think we've received a CeeLo project since Lady Killer, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so
he kind of jumps around a lot.
Lady Killer's all right, even though it was super...
No, I will say he did perform with the Muppets at...
doesn't count.
One of the Christmas parades or Christmas specials or something. I've got a picture of it on my computer for
I've
future
been driving
reference.
around town with the girl
with
I
the
know.
Muppet I love.
Like, F you, Kermit, you piece of
Yo. But anyway, back to I'm knee deep in some Big K.R.I.T over here. Some of these tracks some of these throwaway tracks almost seem like Outkast B-sides. in the nicest way possible.
I'm not. I just one of the B-sides of this remind me of a lot of the tracks on Joey Badass's last project. Not to say that Joey Badass is heavily influenced in Southern style. It just I feel like that style of like conscious rap and that style of hip hop was one of the reasons I really didn't care for his last tape. And I thought overall, technically, he's profound. Production-wise, he's okay, but there's just nothing really to it. There was nothing special that like kind of drew me in. And overall, I was just thought it was kind of lackluster. And nothing really surprised me. That's kind of how I feel about the mad tracks on this. Tracks like 1999, tracks like Confetti, even Big Crit, the opening track, has elements of that. And it just kind of, those tracks, when they start off an album, they kind of just...
They almost turn me in the wrong way.
Yeah. The first listen for this was really hard to get into. And it's
a long listen too.
It's an hour 40 minutes, hour 20 minutes.
It's getting up there.
I know I got his intentions of why he's kind of starting with Big Crit. There's one potential reason he did it is so you have the more popular sounding Southern hip hop go on first. The single Confetti goes on first along with Big Crit, which was a teaser track, I think. All that goes on first, while the second halves were more of conscious hip hop fans, more for jazz hip hop fans.
Yeah, definitely the title track. Perfectly, I think it perfectly embodies what the entire first half of the album is. The same way that here's transition here. Justin Scott is the embodiment of everything that Disc 2 is. I have nothing but mostly praise for the second half of this album.
Second half, I feel like if you took away the first half, second half is fantastic.
I really enjoy the second half. Maybe only nitpicks is that some tracks just overstay their welcome.
Yeah, I can get what you're
I would
saying.
definitely say on Keep the Devil Off and Miss Georgiafornia just go on for too long. You know that
I think the Keep the Devil Off is just so hype that it stays its time. But I get your feel on Miss Georgia Florida.
I mean, they're good tracks, but we're getting upward towards Miss Georgiafornia is 6 minutes, and the last minute of this and the last minute of Keep the Devil Off is literally just the hook, over and over. Went down to Georgia, keep the devil off, keep the devil off, keep the devil off, over and over and over. Like, come on. There's got to be an end at some point. Same with Everlasting. I think it did it too, and that's even a shorter track. Once we get to Higher Calling, all the way to the end, I think is absolutely fantastic.
My favorite part of this album, and I like Harler Carling, and I like the Weekend interlude. But once you get into I think Price of Fame afterwards,
Sure,
that is the strongest part of not only this album, but one of the strongest ends to a hip hop album I've heard this year. I think it just personifies everything it needed to be. And I wish more of the album flowed that way and it covered more of those topics and expanded on them over a whole entire project than it did in the last 4 tracks.
For sure. Price of Fame is I think it's where the whole album clicked for me personally. The first time that track came on, I started to realize why it was getting so many high scores or why I'd been hearing so much praise for the album. It's I don't read reviews before I listen and go and talk about these albums, but I knew that it had been getting a lot of praise, and I think Price of Fame is where I just finally realized why. These last 4 tracks are really, really amazing.
What favorite tracks, both sides?
First side, like I mentioned, definitely Big Bank, Subbenstein, and Get Up to Come Down with CeeLo. I think those are really strong tracks. Of course, there was quite a few that I didn't care for. And then Disc 2, I would have to say, like I said, Price of Fame, Drinking Sessions, The Light, and Bury Me in Gold, the last 4, I think are really fantastic tracks.
I would pretty much have to say the same thing, except I would add Keep the Devil Off and Ox Cord, because Keep the Devil Off is just so hype, and it manages to combine both kind of the conscious style with heavy Southern gospel influence, which is really, really nice, and also shows off Big Crit's singing skills in a sense, which over this whole entire album are actually pretty good, and I want to commend them on that, because I feel like his singing voice and his capability to sing is actually pretty good overall. I think so. I don't think there was a moment where I was just like, oh, Big Crit singing. it's kind of lame. Doesn't really need to fit. I feel like it fits the style, and I like how his when he does sing, it's more of these gospel related tracks, especially in the second half. Oxcord, which is a track I don't think you really cared for.
I didn't care for Oxcord. Like, when I say it sounds like a throwaway Outcast track, that's just the first track that comes to mind. That opening beat reminds me of something off of, like, Stankonia or something, you know? But then as we get into the track, his lyrics more resemble, like, a modern-day R&B song. It just seems very confused. I didn't really like the subject matter. I didn't really like the...
Well, I personally enjoyed the subject matter. I liked him kind of reminiscing on music and talking about passing the Oxcord in the hook. And I felt like that was one of the moments in the second half where I was like, okay, this concept, I actually like that you explored it a bit. And I didn't really get too much of those moments on the first half where I'm like, he takes the concept and explores it in a way I'm actually interested in.
It was mostly just... honestly, a lot of it just seems like filler.
Yeah, the first half, I can't commend this enough, but like it's just like, let me just list off all the tracks so it's easier. I would say Confetti, 1999, Ride With Me, Layup,
Ooh.
Oxcord, which is 5 out of the 11 tracks, not even including the interlude, which is just a skit. So basically half the album is just this filler that's just meh. It's not really exciting, at least to me personally. I know a lot of people who love this style of hip-hop, really love this southern style of hip-hop, and Big K.R.I.T with his great technical skill on top probably is really appealing to them. But to me, I feel like the hooks are kind of lackluster, the storytelling isn't really that great on these tracks, and nothing is really wowing me production-wise. Nothing is really there, especially when you compare it to the second half, when the second half production is fantastic. One moment that really surprised me is that Big Bank was actually good. The track that features T.I.
I didn't think it would be, but I really liked it.
When T.I.'s on the track, I'm just like, oh no. But he actually had like a really good performance. I want to like give him praise for that, because like I don't think I would ever actually like a T.I. performance.
I appreciated it.
Yeah, it felt natural, and I feel like it, especially on the first half, the more southern side, it really fit. And I liked, especially it's more I'm not gonna say braggadocio, but since it is not as conscious and not as more braggadocio, he fits perfectly right into the mix, and it actually makes for a good track.
I think so too.
So like, what other than like the mem moments, did you have any problems with the second half?
Like I said, for some of the tracks just like overstaying, I think that is my main beef with it. I think I don't want to call it a downfall, but I think a lot of what maybe my problems were for the album is that it's just so long. This album is honestly a marathon run, and it's not even near like Kamasi Washington's new album or like some of the longer albums out there. But an hour and 20 minutes is a lot to sit through, and I understand that it's two halves, but also when a lot of it's filler and a lot of the tracks are just longer, in my opinion, like I said, overstaying the welcome, it's just hard to get through. And it leads me almost to the argument, like, if you make an infinite number of songs, not all of them are going to be bad, and people are going to enjoy at least a couple of them, you know? Do I only enjoy some of the songs, especially on the first half, do I only enjoy some of the songs because he's made this big amount of songs and they can't all be bad?
Yeah.
You know? That's at least part of, like, my downfall for the album, or the album's downfall for me, is that it's just so long to listen to that it's easy to lose focus. It's easy to lose what you like about the album when you're listening for so long that you start to nitpick. And like, luckily I took this in like chunks, but if I would have tried to just sit through the whole thing, I would have gotten so bored by the end, and I would have missed out on the 4 best tracks of the album.
First listen for me personally, it was even hard to pick up on like the second half. I was just so burnt out by the first.
Absolutely.
But the second listen, especially on this second listen, I was able to actually find enjoyment not only in the second half, but in the first half. Tracks like Stub Scene and Big Bank and Get Up to Come Down like really stood out to me on the first half, and then the end of the second half I thought was phenomenal. Third listen was a little bit more easier. I just ended up just skipping.
It
like,
definitely
a
gets
majority
easier
of it.
as you go,
Yeah.
and you start to learn like what the filler is. But when you treat every track the same on that first listen,
It's tough.
it's tough. It's tough for sure. And like I said, like the 4 best tracks are at the very end of the album. They are the 4 last tracks on the album. That's going to be hard to get to. I mean, that's your treasure. That's your prize for making it through this marathon. Are most people going to find those if they only listen the first time? You know, it took me at least until the second listen to realize, like, I've got something here. Yeah, The Price of Fame, like, clicked the first time, and I really enjoyed the last 4 tracks, but I didn't understand what they were all about, and I didn't understand to the extent of which these are such good tracks until I listened to it a second time, or I listened to it a third time, or I really, like, dwelled on the tracks. It's hard to get to the best part of the album on your first listen, and I think that might be where some of the underlying problems are for the album.
One thing I want to talk about, especially with this project, is the concept of double album, and how I feel like, at least with this, I can see why it's a double album. I can see the concept of why it is released as double albums.
For sure. There's definitely a huge divide in, like,
Yeah.
personalities.
Whereas I feel like Tribe Called Quest's last album, not that it was bad, I really love that record, but I feel like there really wasn't a point for it to be a double album. There was never really an explanation given to why it was a double album, at least from my knowledge. It just kind of was 2 parts for some reason. At least with this one, you are getting 2 different sections of it being a double album. You're getting the Big Crit side, you're getting the Justin Scott side. Each side has its own album artwork. But one thing I would have liked for this double album is if it was actually released as 2 parts. Because if you're going to create album art for another side and you're going to entitle it a different side, why not release them as 2 different sides? But
Instead of just the one. Also, the album art for the second half is outstanding.
Yeah.
I really like the album art for both sides of this album.
I think I like the first one better, but I like
The second one I think is really cool.
the second one's also cool. I don't know. This is like I feel like a Danger Doom scenario where both artworks are pretty good, like the US and the EU.
The US
how
artwork is better than the UK artwork.
But both of them are good.
They are both good.
Yeah. But then another thing about this topic is then if you release them as 2 sides, people kind of get confused, especially how I was with the last Shabazz Palace's album, where you release 2 albums and you don't know where to start, and you don't know where to end, and it kind of becomes this mess, especially with a more abstract project like that one. It was really confusing. But with this one, I feel like it's you don't even need to start on a particular side, really. You could literally start with Justin Scott and then go into Big Crit.
Go into Big Crit. I don't think it would be as satisfying, but you can because they tell 2 different stories.
And I feel like this project in particular, it may have benefited from being do 2 different projects, because then my overall score would have been completely different. One, Big Crit probably wouldn't be getting that good of a score, but I feel like Justin Scott would have been receiving a better score than I'm going to give these 2 albums overall. So
Yeah.
I feel like damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. But I feel like it's an interesting topic to bring up, especially with double albums and the layout, which is the thing I'm particularly interested in. And I just always like how artists seem to lay out their albums in a particular order. But yeah, overall, I think the first half of this is kind of meh. There's some great moments in the first half. Don't get me wrong. Again, Big Bank, Substein, Get Up to Come Down. But there's just a lot of meh. I don't think any track on the first half is bad. I just think they're kind of meh.
They're forgettable.
Like, I'm not gonna remember any of the tracks first half until I eventually come back to them just to scroll through the first half. Mm-hmm. But the Justin Scott side is it's great. I can't explain that enough. It's just I feel like he puts a lot of his time and his soul into the second half, where I feel like it probably should matter more that he is more introspective on the second half than the first. Because if he went introspective on the Big Crit side, it really wouldn't make any sense. But still, the Big Crit side didn't really have to be as mad as it was overall. But yeah, I think this is a good record, even though there is a lot of iffy content on the first half.
There's a lot worse stuff you could be listening to.
I feel like overall, even a lot of the mess stuff was a lot more enjoyable than the Joey Badass project that I was indifferent on. To wrap it up, essentially, I think this is an 8, like a straight 8. I feel like if these were 2 separate records, I think the Big K.R.I.T side would get like a 5, and the Justin Scott side would get a 9. But I feel like when you combine the two and the best moments of each, it becomes an 8. I know the averages of that may not make too much sense, but
no.
But I feel like first side's 5, second side's a 9. But yeah, 8 overall. I think it's good. I think you should give it a listen because again, me and Trevor are more hard on the Southern hip hop songs because it's something we've heard a lot before, and we really only want to hear it when you're doing something interesting with it. And he's not doing anything really different with it to justify it being there, so we're kind of just thrown off by it and not really interested by it. What did you think? Final thoughts.
I was probably going to give it an 8 also. If I had to separate the albums, Big K.R.I.T would get a 6, and Justin Scott, I really think either like an 8.75 or a 9.
A night?
9. Forever is a mighty long 9. I hope Big K.R.I.T experiments more with his Justin Scott side rather than the Big K.R.I.T side, and if this might show some sort of transition, I don't know, I can't delve into his consciousness or anything, but if this shows some sort of transition from Big K.R.I.T's style of this overdone, deep-fried Southern hip-hop over to this more conscious jazz rap, it's becoming increasingly popular, but I think that when you do it well, it can really be something special, no matter how often it's done. And I think that Justin Scott shows a lot of potential and a lot of really good moments that show K.R.I.T's introspective on himself and not of his character. I hope that he can continue to delve into that because Justin Scott as a standalone album is fantastic.
So yeah, that is it for this Big K.R.I.T review. We're going to move on to some quicker reviews. I got a couple things I want to talk about real fast. And then we'll get into the new Rapsody record. First thing I want to talk about is this new Samiyam Pizza Party. Samiyam is a producer. He's worked with artists such as Earl Sweatshirt and Action Bronson. His last project, which was released last year on Slothrust Records, was interesting. I'm not going to say it was good, but it had a lot of, even though for some of the more bland moments, there was more exciting moments. Mirror with Earl Sweatshirt is a great track. Mr. Wonderful with Action Bronson's another great track on the record. And some his instrumentals I thought were really fun and exciting. But there was a lot of bland to it. And with this new project, Pizza Party, it's about half an hour long. And it's also released on Slothrust Records. He released it a couple weeks ago. It's just kind of bland. There's not really anything too exciting to it. I think there's like one good track I really enjoy. The Boat Can Now Leave. The final track with which features a John Wayne feature, but it's not a rap feature. It's a production feature.
John Wayne unplugged.
Overall, I thought this tape was just kind of lackluster. Samiyam, I know, is capable of more. I would have liked to see at least a feature of some type, a rap feature, because I feel like his production style, when people are over it, it's always fun and exciting, and I would like to see more of that. But I just thought this tape was pretty bland. It was just, there's nothing really exciting to it. It wasn't as fun as his last record. There was nothing. It kind of just overstayed its presence for the 20 minutes I listened to it, and I at least for his next project, I hope he does something different with it. I hope he finds. At least for his next project, I hope he finds what was special on Animals Have Feelings and puts it into his next project. Because this is just kind of nothing exciting. The Boat Can Now Leave is a decent track. I'm not going to say it's fantastic or anything. It's just decent. I found it listenable the most out of any of the tracks on the album. It was the only single to the album, but I feel like it is the best track overall. I think you should give it a listen, at least try it out, see if you like it. But I'm not saying it's great or anything. Moving on. Slothrust. Show Me How You Want It to Be. Slothrust is a indie rock band who I discovered because they did the theme song to one of my favorite shows, You're the Worst. The track 730, which is on the record Of Course You Do, I think is great. I think the track's great. I think the whole entire album is great. I think it may not be doing anything super out there, super new, but I think it was just a fun little indie rock pop album. It was super catchy, super exciting. I really liked the songwriting on it. Overall, there wasn't anything super new or anything different about it, but I thought it was just a fun little album. They followed that up with an album they released last year, Everyone Else. I thought that record overall was just kind of... It wasn't as fun, wasn't as catchy. It was a bit more aggressive, and it was a lot more rough around the edges. I thought overall it was just kind of meh. There was a couple good moments on it. I think Horseshoe Grab and Like a Child Hiding Behind Your Tombstone are two great examples of tracks that are on that album, but I felt like it wasn't catchy enough or exciting enough to really justify its own existence. It kind of just went off at times on these long tangents that didn't really lead anywhere, and it was just too moody for its own good. But this new record, Show Me How You Want It to Be, it's a cover record of just a lot of popular music, and I feel like overall that's really exciting to hear because I wasn't too keen on listening to this at first because I didn't really think anything was going to really come out of it important because their last strand of singles and their last album wasn't really too exciting. But since they're really working with only popular music, it comes out exciting because that's kind of what they're best at, is working with really catchy and fun tracks. What are you looking at me for?
You know the best song they covered. I smell sex and candy. Yeah.
That song, Sex and Candy.
Who's that lounge?
I hate you. Please die. The track Sex and Candy opens it, which is when I heard the cover a couple months ago, I wasn't really too excited about it. But listening to it now, I actually do like the cover. I think it's fun. Some other moments that I really enjoy in the album, I like their cover of Hit Me Baby One More Time. I think it's just fun little pop track that they cover, and I feel like their style, their indie rock style, their kind of almost grunginess kind of works for it. Happy Together and Let's Stay Together and Cupid, the three tracks on the end, I think are great. I think their style really adds a lot to these tracks. And overall, this is not a good record, and it's not mind-blowing. It's just a cover album, and I think it's a fun little cover album. I think it's okay. I will come back to this at some point because I think it is fun. But I don't think anything on this is super out there, super need to listen to. If you want to listen to some just some fun little covers with some grungy indie rock style, go ahead, check out these tracks because I feel like they're fun and they're just a nice listen. Anything more than that. Overall, this little cover album's okay.
I enjoy cover albums, and you actually brought up quite a few things that like I've been thinking about quite a bit about how to make covers good and how to go beyond just covers. Do you know what I'm saying? It was like thought process was sparked like a couple weeks ago when Anthony Fantano called out Ninja Sex Party for making Under the Covers Part 2 because it's literally just a karaoke album, you know? And like karaoke's fun to listen to if you've got the fan base for it. And obviously Ninja Sex Party does have the fan base for that kind of thing, that people would actually actively buy these not very good covers with even worse production and even worse vocals than like normal. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
There has to be something that makes your cover album better than a generic album called Under the Covers, because I know that's what they're all called.
Literally,
Under the Covers.
Yeah, they're all called Under the Covers.
Literally, I think Slothrust does a better job covering
I think
than a lot of other bands do, because they add something new to it. The same way, one of my favorite cover albums is Darren's Coconut Ass from Goldfinger, and they played a live show. The ska band Goldfinger played a live show, and they just covered a bunch of songs. They covered like The Cure, Jim Croce, like all sorts of just out there artists, but their ska style made it something that I would want to listen to over and over. You know, they covered Just Like Heaven, like I said, by The Cure, but it's not that slow, moody pop ballad anymore. It's this fast-paced, like breakneck speed, really fun ska song to listen to. And it takes on a whole different meaning when done by Goldfinger than it does by The Cure, and they're both really good songs, or they're both really good versions of the same song, just based on style alone. And I think Slothrust is a success in doing that because their covers done on this album play differently than the normal style. If you try to match chord for chord, word for word covers, then what's the point anymore?
I think Slothrust overall falls in the spectrum of cover albums from worst to best. They fall medium on the scale. I think it's okay. It's good. I think they do a decent job, but it isn't anything on the range of Shoo Shoo Plays Twin Peaks.
No,
Like,
and I wouldn't even call that a cover album.
I would. It essentially is a cover album because they are.
But they've added so much stuff.
Well, I think that's kind of what makes.
That's what makes it special.
And it essentially is a cover album. Even though they kind of do put a lot new into it, I feel like they're still taking the basics of what make the Twin Peaks soundtrack so great, but just doing it as Shoo Shoo instead of as Angelo. What's his name?
Hans Zimmer.
Hans Zimmer, yeah, definitely Hans Zimmer. Angelo, I forget his name. I always say his name wrong. It doesn't even matter. I'm sorry. Main guy behind the music of Twin Peaks, and Angelo Bartolomei. I think that's his name. I always mess it up. But sorry about that. But I think, yeah, Slothrust falls in the middle of the scale. It isn't. Again, it's okay. I think they do a decent job of doing everything, and I'm gonna actually listen to this a little bit more because I do think it's fun. It isn't just a rip-off cover album. I think they do a decent job. And if they continue on this trajectory with this style, but actually applying it to their own music, I think their next album may actually be somewhere close to their first and being a really, really fun little indie rock album. And that's all I really wanted from Slothrust. It's just a nice, fun indie rock album. Moving on, final thing we're talking about today. Are you ready? Ready to talk to this album, Trevor?
Let's talk to it.
Rapsody.
Rhapsody.
I think you mean Rapsody.
No.
We're going to be talking about Rapsody's new project, Laila's Wisdom. Rapsody is an artist I became familiar with by her performance or her appearance on Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly on the track Complexion, which is actually one of my favorite tracks off To Pimp a Butterfly. To Pimp a Butterfly is a record that holds not only a special place in my heart, but in Trevor's heart. And I feel like in the heart a lot of Kendrick fans, because it's personally, in our opinion, To Pimp a Butterfly is the best album Kendrick's released. Not only the best album that Kendrick's released, it's one of the best hip-hop albums of the last decade. Not only is it the best hip-hop album of the last decade, it's one of the best albums in general in the last decade. Kendrick was able to put so much... He's just able to build like an excellent world through that album. It holds a special place in the heart. And you may be asking why we bring this up is because To Pimp a Butterfly is, I would say, similar to this project. I feel like Laila's Wisdom is almost like, how did you describe it earlier?
To put it in simplified terms, and it's not 100% accurate, this is the female take on To Pimp a Butterfly. To Pimp a Butterfly, like Kendrick's version, is very male-oriented because he is a male. And he talks about how the black man is discriminated against, how the black man faces racism, how the black boy was raised in the streets, raised in the hood, tried to make it out of the hood. And nothing's wrong with that. He's speaking what he knows, and he speaks he speaks the truth. And it made for a really, really good conscious album. And it's not to say he doesn't mention women. He doesn't mention the unity of man and women, man and woman. But from a female perspective, that is what Laila's wisdom essentially is. And as we've talked about before on the show, if you're going to borrow in a certain style or a certain genre, borrow from the best. Don't borrow from lackluster examples. Don't borrow from so-so artists or artists that are even good but not the best examples. Borrow from the best of your genre. And I think that Rapsody definitely borrows from Kendrick in the To Pimp a Butterfly style, but she does it in a way that's very tasteful, does it in a way that's very much so a tribute to him and not a blatant ripoff. And I really appreciate it because it made for a really good album, and I think that paid off really well for her. Spoiler alert, I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, it's a great record. Just getting into the start, this record's 14 tracks, about an hour long. It's another little bit longer listen. I think, yeah, Rapsody is able to incorporate about what made To Pimp a Butterfly so good in the first place, at least taking what made that jazz rap album, that conscious hip hop album so good. Not to say, we're not just saying that she like stole from Kendrick or anything like that, or she's just blatantly ripping off Kendrick. I'm saying she's incorporating elements of that. And it's obvious. Kendrick even has an appearance on this track. A lot of the artists that were featured on To Pimp a Butterfly are featured on this. A lot of the production is kind of similar in taste. A lot of the jazz rap productions very similar to Butterfly. And overall, I feel like Rapsody is able to make a very, very strong conscious hip hop album. Now, where do you think is the best point to start off on this?
Honestly, I would just start from the beginning because I think every track has a lot of good things to say.
Yeah.
I think that every track on this album has value in one way or another. There are obviously some that I enjoyed more than others. I think Power with Kendrick Lamar was such, I almost said powerful, but that's like not a good word for it. It's probably what I would call the most exemplary track on the album because Kendrick and Rapsody bounce off of each other so well and they just resonate with one another. This is the guy that she had borrowed off of from To Pimp a Butterfly, drew heavy inspiration from what I can tell, and I think that their styles just mesh so well to create such an amazing track.
And not to mention also that track features Lance Skywalker, and I gotta say, this is the only track that I've heard Lance Skywalker on where he doesn't physically annoy me. It's just like he just shows up and it's actually decent. Like his style, his bit of quirkiness works on the hook. And I think it fits in this context where any other time he pops up, I'm not really feeling it because I feel like his particular style isn't really suited for whatever is. You can't just put him on any track. There has to be a purpose to him being there. And I feel like on this track, his purpose fits. And I feel like him on the hook is a good decision overall. Yeah, the song's really empowering. I think it's good to have this at the start of the album right after Laila's Wisdom.
For sure.
Laila's Wisdom overall is a great intro.
I think so too.
I think that's the strongest. It's a good start to everything. I love when rap albums have great, just like decent introductions to everything, and I feel like that's a common trope we keep on running into. We even ran into it literally 15 minutes ago when we were talking about Big K.R.I.T. Forever is a Mighty Long Time, the introduction track to that, Big K.R.I.T, and then on the second side you have Justin Scott. So, like, there's two introduction tracks that kind of set up the modes of not only on both sides, and this, Laila's Wisdom, sets up basically the mood for the rest of the album. Sets it up pretty much everything. I think that's great.
I maybe talk about the exclusively female things that come up on the album that I think are, like, really important to talk about. I never came across a track that I thought was bad on the album, but I think that I came across quite a few that I enjoyed more than others.
Yeah.
For instance, Pay Up. Something Kendrick doesn't talk about is sometimes black men are seen as like lazy, and she's telling this boyfriend or husband, whoever, like, ladies, if you've got a man on your couch that doesn't work, make him pay up or get out, you know? Yeah. Like, that's I enjoyed that track personally, just something that's not touched upon super often. Sassy. Rhapsody's like ability to be sassy and confident and powerful and can be up in your face when she needs to be, has witty comebacks. I think that's something that was touched upon here that's not really touched upon in To Pimp a Butterfly. To Black and Ugly, about how like the black woman is not seen as beautiful sometimes in our society or in middle class, like white society or whatever, but she sees herself as beautiful and that's what matters. I really enjoyed Black and Ugly as a track. You Should Know, I think, is really good, featuring Busta Rhymes, who's got one of the creepiest outros of all.
What do you mean creepiest?
Just his voice, like the raspiness in his voice and his like evil laugh at the end of You Should Know.
I really liked Busta Rhymes.
No, I liked it too. I thought it was kind of creepy with that laugh, but it was good.
I really didn't feel like it fit in the first half of track, but I really enjoyed his performance overall.
I like her use of outros and like interludes within the tracks.
Yeah, there's a lot of interludes in tracks, especially on Writing. Writing has its own little interlude. I forget the name of it. I don't think it really is mentioned, but it's there. And I think there's one on Ooey, maybe? I forget. But yeah, there's a couple of interludes inside the tracks here, which are really nice. And it provides a nice little instrumental shake-up to provide reasons for the length of the tracks, which are nice. And also it keeps you in the track. You don't really go out to
I don't like going into an interlude because I feel like that's just another track that I'll skip. That's like a wasted slot, and you can have as many slots as you want, so it's not wasted. Have as many tracks as you want, but I feel like if you use tracks for interludes, I'm gonna lose interest after a while. I think having Busta Rhymes at the end of You Should Know, for example, kept me in the track, and it kept Busta Rhymes within it kept him within the scope of the track and didn't just give Busta Rhymes his own interlude on Rhapsody's album. I think that would be kind of silly. But having him at the end of the track talking about the same subject matter, couldn't find a place for him to fit within the actual song, but to give him this little chunk at the end, I think was really a good idea. And she does that quite a few times with BJ's The Chicago Kid, does it with Anderson .Paak, no, Moonchild. Yeah. At the end of Nobody has an outro, things like that I really enjoy, especially it's almost the same world building that Kendrick used on To Pimp a Butterfly. In Big K.R.I.T's interlude, the classic interlude on his latest Forever Is a Mighty Long Time, it brought me out of the song a little bit. And while I thought that the interlude was entertaining, I thought it was really funny, it wasn't part of the song. It was just a dialogue between two people. It didn't have any instrumental, but backing it. The song right before it obviously had ended, and the song after it obviously had not started. It wasn't part of the world. It wasn't part of the characters that we were developing of Big K.R.I.T and the world around him. But I think in Rhapsody's album, having Busta Rhymes and Moonchild and whoever else features as their own interludes within the track, with their own backing instrumentals, with their own style, their own freedom to do whatever they want, and the interlude builds Rhapsody's world really well.
Yeah. And go back to the Big K.R.I.T. I like what you said, is it takes you out of the action, and when one track begins and one track ends. While I enjoy what's happening in the interludes, I think there is a purpose to them being there. I feel like they may go on for a bit too long, and they might overstay their welcome, and they really... It's nice to see Rhapsody include them in such a manner that it feels like one cohesive, flowing project throughout. I'm never really taken out of the action. I'm never pumping the brakes. I'm constantly moving forward through Rhapsody's world, which is nice.
For sure.
One thing I think you forgot to discover on topics that weren't really covered in To Pimp a Butterfly, the track Knock on My Door, where she's essentially, I want to say, idolizing this guy. I don't know if idolizing is the correct term, but fantasizing. I think fantasizing is a better term, or essentially just waiting.
That is a good one. Yeah. She keeps finding value in him, no matter how much wrong he does her, or how often he doesn't show up or stands her up or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting topic to cover, and I feel like we never really hear about a lot of fantasy in music. Not like fantasy as in like fantasy the genre, but like fantasy as in fantasizing over
Like
someone.
knights and wizards.
Yeah. I don't think Rhapsody covered enough about dragons.
I don't think so either.
As much as the Wu-Tang Clan discusses dragons.
They do. They're good at world building. I think so.
In their own sense, not Rhapsody's world building very different from Wu-Tang Clan stuff.
Okay, when you think of the Wu-Tang Clan, what are you thinking of?
Karate.
Yeah, thank you. Me too.
Chinese food.
I'm thinking about these like dojos in the middle of New York.
I'm thinking about getting crappy Chinese food
with the Wu-Tang.
But Ghostface Killah is really eating. He's eating like really noisily. So he's just like crunching really loud
during the recording.
He's like he is crab rangoon, but it's like he's crunching it to like new levels. Like it's like waking up the entire neighborhood.
He's right in the microphone. There's like bits of crab rangoon flying out of his mouth all over the mic.
Yeah, it's what we were talking about. I got distracted, but yeah, the topics she discovers on this, they're great. They're new topics, and that's what I like about conscious rap is when people discover new topics to talk about. And it doesn't always have to be about in this jazz rap genre like Big Crit was, like Twin Butterfly was. I like when conscious hip hop is not just jazz rap. Like a best example of that of Mike Eagle's last project, where he found an interesting topic to talk about. It was both the Robert Taylor Holmes not only talking about how it affected him and his family and his aunt, but how it affected the community. And I feel like that was a really interesting thing that you don't really hear a lot about, but you think is a really common issue. But with this, she finds several issues that aren't really talked about and implicates them in just great ways. I feel like the best example of this, Jesus Coming, which pound for pound probably one of the best tracks of the year. The sample that Knife Wonder does is just goddamn fantastic. It's just his production on that is great. It's just great. But the track Jesus Coming, she essentially tells 3 stories. The 2 most important being the story of a woman losing her child during this kind of gang fight. Is that the best way to turn it? A gang basically essentially shoots her child, and she had no involvement with them. It just she's caught in the crossfire. Whereas the second story is more about military, which I thought was a weird thing that she covered. I'm not saying it should be condemned or anything. I thought it was just surprising to hear her cover that topic, because especially in hip hop, you don't really hear topic of military unless it's something super negative. But in this, it was more about the soldiers and what they have to deal with than anything else. And I think that was a really nice critique. And the 3 stories that she tells on Jesus Coming are so separate from one another, and it really brings a new perspective to not only her as an artist and how she's able to construct how she's able to narratively build these stories, but I feel like it brings a lot more excitement to her work and a lot more meaning to it, which is nice in conscious hip hop. And also these topics aren't really talked about that much. Like as much as we hear about gang warfare and military, we never hear them in a way that Rhapsody highlights them, which is nice. And again, track Jesus Coming, probably one of the best tracks of the year. It's just so beautiful. I can't even explain how great the production is. It's just utterly fantastic. It's just beautiful. I think the only track that even comes close to like even matching the production is Quelle Chris and Mine Design on Popeye. I feel like that's the only sample-based hip-hop track that even comes close to even close to like touching the production on this track. One thing I want to talk about is that I feel like every feature on this album works. And I feel like
it has purpose in the same way that To Pimp a Butterfly's had purpose. And I hate to keep comparing it to Pimp a Butterfly. But it's such an easy comparison. But it is such an easy comparison because they are both so similar and both of the almost highest caliber. I feel like every feature on that album had purpose, and I feel like every feature on here definitely understands what they're here for in the way that, like, another comparison for you, Demon Days, Gorillaz Demon Days, I feel like every feature on there had purpose. And Gorillaz really played into everybody's individual styles to come across on this album that they wanted. Gorillaz are usually really good about that, is picking people that fit the style of what they're going for, not picking people because they like their style. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I feel like Rapsody picked these features because they go along with the style that she was trying to get across. I think Kendrick's timbre and Kendrick's energy fit so well with her. Like I said, they resonate so well on Power that just ends up being taken to new levels than if Rapsody would have just done it herself. And even like Lance Skywalker, like you mentioned, annoying in every other track that he's on, but works really well on here because his style matches what Rapsody was trying to go for here, and it works out.
Lance Skywalker, BJ's Chicago Kid, two artists I really don't like on their own most of the time. Anytime they pop up, they really don't excite me or bring any interest to the table. But on this project, I feel like they fit. They have a role, and they do it well. And I hope that goes into their own music. I'm not too certain about that, but it shows that they have potential, and that's nice. I always like to see artists having potential. They may not use it to their own ability, but it's nice to see that they have it there. But going back into the features, I feel, again, every feature on this serves a purpose. Even Busta Rhyme, while it may be his own little interlude that's still part of the song, it serves a purpose. And it's entertaining as all hell. And again, a lot of the vocal features from Moonchild to Amber Navarne or BJ Chicago Kid all fit perfectly on this project. And I'm glad they are here. So, final thoughts, Trevor. What do you think about this?
I, for one, like I said, really enjoyed the album. There's not a bad track on here. Not in the way that Big K.R.I.T didn't have a bad track on his album, but I mean that I genuinely enjoyed every track on here. No matter how long they were, no matter who featured on it, no matter what kind of production it had, I felt like every track had something important to say and held some sort of importance on this album. I really enjoyed it. I'm probably going to give it a 9.
I think I'm going to follow you in that same boat. I think this is a 9. This is 9. This is a straight 9. I really love it. There's just some of my favorite moments of this year have been from this project. Jesus Coming, Power, Black and Ugly, Roller Coaster Jam called Love, You Should Know. Just a bunch of great stuff on here, and I feel like this project has been kind of slept on in a sense because it's been out for a couple months, and we're just getting now to it, and I feel kind of
nobody's talked about it to my knowledge.
Yeah, and that just disappoints me in a sense. In the same way,
it's really a shame.
In the same way, I feel like a lot of people didn't really talk about the Quayle Chris project, or people weren't really talking about the Open Mike Eagle project. Those
are like 3 of my favorite albums of the year, right there, were 3 of the most slept on albums.
Yeah, but this album's great. I can't recommend it enough. I'm probably gonna listen to it very soon. I think I've listened to Jesus Coming like probably 15 times today. I'm not gonna lie. I had that track on loop earlier when you were gone. It's great. It's so good. It's such a good track. I love the production. That's me nerding out. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so that about wraps it up for this week of the Anthony and Todd Show. What's next week? Well, next week should be a really exciting episode.
Oh, I'm really
excited. It could be really good or it could be really bad. I know one thing's really fun. I don't know if you'll find it fun, but I personally found it really fun. First thing we're going to talk about is the new King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album. I'm going to attempt to say this. Polygon de Wonderland. Polygon de what the it's called? The new King Gizzard Lizard album that's apparently being put in the public domain, which is I find fantastic. I think more artists should just randomly put their work in the public domain. Just for the fun.
It's all big publicity stuff.
It's good. More artists should just randomly put their artwork in the public domain. I think it's great. This is, of course, their 4th and final record of 2017. I don't think they're going to make another record after this, which is nice. And hopefully they go out with a bang, because their last 2 records weren't that good. And especially Murder of the Universe. That's probably one of my least favorite albums of the year. But we're also going to cover next week an album I find really fun. I don't know if Trevor's gonna find it really fun. But the new Little Pump record, it's been out for a while, I know, but I want to cover it. And I also want to kind of just talk about the point of artists like Little Pump and why I think it's nice that we're in a generation where that's allowed. That's my main reason we're talking about it next week. Just to talk about artists like him and Lil Yachty and why I feel like they're actually a blessing in a weird sense. Well, they may be a curse at times, and maybe they're more curses than blessings, but I feel like they do have their own unique rule that kind of needs to be fulfilled in the music industry. So that's what we're talking about. King Gizzard, Little Pump. Should be a fun week. One may be really bad, one may be really annoying to you, but it should be a fun week nonetheless.
What about the Grammys nomination?
Oh yeah, we're also going to talk about the Grammy. We're going to give our predictions for the Grammys. That should be fun because it's just going to be me and Trevor yelling at each other. So yeah, that's been it for this week's episode of the Anthony and Todd Show. Until next time, guys, make sure you like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, subscribe to us on YouTube, Podbean, Stitcher, Google Play Music, iTunes, and Spotify. What? We're on Spotify? Oh,
Nuh-uh. That's a limited amount, mind you. Spotify thought that we are good enough to put on their website. That's really something.
We're moving up to the
Moving
big time.
Moving on up to the east side. And we finally got a piece of the Spotify.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
For that one. If you want to submit a question for next week's episode, there's a link in the description. And if you like our theme songs produced by our big friend DJ
Lil
Quest.
Pump.
Do we have the same big friend? I think you're confused, mister. I've never met Little Pump before in my life, even though I want to. I think that would be a really interesting conversation.
I think if I had a rap name, it would be Big Trev the Refrigerator Kid.
I'm just going to
go on.
Our intro song is called No Sleep, and our outro song is called Reply. There's a link to the songs in the description. The link should take you to SoundCloud, which it's closed, right? It's a mail-in service now.
It's done. It's a mail-in service.
200 days ago.
Sometimes they use carrier pigeons, and when you get the carrier pigeon, then it's like got a cassette tape just taped to its leg. Every once in a while, they'll have like people come to your door, okay? And what they have to do is they either have to carry a boombox and play the music for you, or they have to sing it word for word. And then they leave after you're done listening.
Someone has to come to my door and sing a Gucci Gang.
Yes, because SoundCloud is
That's
closed.
the world I want to live in. I'm glad.
It'll create a better economy. It'll create a lot more jobs.
I hope there's just a person designated to each song. So they have to go. They only know that one song.
Yeah. So if you wanna get like an entire mixtape, there's gonna be a crew of like 15 people showing up at your door.
This has been episode.
They're riding a bus.
This has been episode 15 of the Anthony and Todd Show, an episode we called
Forever is an alrighty amount of time.
See you guys next time.
Bye, guys.